The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that 2 dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan and there will be a large-scale evacuation on March 22nd, 2025. And the date that the video is posted proves this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this email. Now, this was composed on January 24th, but the knowledge regarding, so in other words, what I'm about to explain, I'm really looking forward to it. It's extremely interesting and extremely important, actually, extremely important. But this revelation regarding what I'll be talking about with this comet G3, which some have said to be the comet of 2025, and the St. Brice's Day massacre in the year 1002 in the UK, and other things, many other things. This revelation, as we can see with the date of the email, came in mid to late January. And at that time, the precise date of the prediction for the bombs was not clear. It was not known. The fact that the Lord is pointing to dirty bombs exploding in Manhattan has been known since 2019. But he has developed trails of signs, hundreds, so many signs along the way over the last years regarding this event that we are predicting in this video. Okay, this is a very big deal in God's science because of the amount of information that God has provided for it. And it is through these trails of signs which have interconnected dates or webs or nodes in the web. If you can picture a spider web, each node in the web is what produces the web. You can't have a spider web without these different nodes. And the nodes, these dates, with the relevant, clear, related signs and connections, is how God tells these stories, including what I'm about to tell here regarding the St. Brice's Day massacre. This wouldn't be possible. God wouldn't be able to tell these stories were it not for these connections between these steps in the trails of signs leading to the ultimate event. You see, it would be one thing for God to say, hey, to, touch someone on the shoulder and say, you know what, I'm choosing you. Tell the world that such and such is going to happen on such and such date. But what good would that be? Besides provide more evidence for the God of the Bible, but there's already an overwhelming amount of evidence. Not that it wouldn't be amazing evidence. And it will be when this prediction comes to pass. There will be nothing like it in terms of an evangelism tool. So, but the point is that God does all of this elaborate web building with his signs, which is only being explained on this channel, in order to communicate these extremely amazing stories which contain essential, profound knowledge that everyone needs to know, and information. Everyone needs to know what God is communicating through the big picture of signs, through these stories, which are only possible through the big picture of signs. And God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. And this is an example, this St. Brice's Day massacre and what I'll be explaining here. It's extremely interesting and extremely important. So, although this email regarding this half of the revelation was known on January 24th, as we can see, okay, the revelation that the date would be on March 22nd was understood in late February or mid-February. Okay, so I'll explain that later as we go. So let's begin with what I wrote. So I'm going to read what I wrote back in January, and I'm going to, not all of it is 100% relevant for now in this video. So I'll skim a little bit and do my best to explain what the thoughts were back then. And back then was a long time ago in terms of God's signs. The amount of signs on a daily basis is overwhelming. But I've now managed to sort of catch up and have the opportunity just a few days before the predicted bombs, today being the 16th, the predicted bombs being 6 days from now. I have the opportunity now to go back to, information that was known in January and update what was going on with the clear connection, as I'll explain. I'll explain it, but the day of the perihelion for the comet is 68 days before the predicted bombs. Why is that relevant? Well, I'm just going to touch on the surface of it, but I'll explain it in this video. The name Obama, as well as the word bomb, are equal to 68 in Hebrew gematria. And that's why we have this connection. Now, how does the comet, how is that relevant? And how is, by in turn, the St. Brice's Day Massacre relevant in all of this? I'll explain. But first thing to say is the date, if you will, that symbolizes the comet, it's perihelion. It's a closest approach to the sun, which is how astronomers measure the comet. You have the comet's perihelion and aphelion, right? And those are its furthest distance from the sun and its closest distance to the sun. And so this date, in other words, symbolizes this comet. But what also happened, and I'm getting ahead here, but what happened on the 13th of January this year is that the comet reached its perihelion, and that was the same day that the moon occulted Mars. And God has been communicating these moon signs in relation to this prediction for the dirty bombs, because it's clear from his signs that the dirty bombs will explode on the half moon phase of the moon, as I have explained in prior videos, prior to this video being posted. Okay, so let me see. This same email, okay, let me see, okay. This link here is to this Wikipedia page for tares. So there's this mention of tares in the Bible. Jesus mentioned these tares that grow up among the wheat. So a tare is a type of plant that resembles a stalk, or whatever you call it, of wheat. And so they're indistinguishable when you look at them. But from what I understand or recall, you can tell by their fruit, which would be also metaphorical, because also Jesus said to not judge by appearances, but by their fruit, or judge a tree by its fruit. And Jesus warned to not judge by appearances, which is the warning for the left and their demonic Trump derangement syndrome. It's demonic. It's rooted in evil and Satan. But the root of that is not the root of it, but they are not able to see. I just throw that in there as an example of not judging by appearances, and instead by their actions and what they do and what they are for example, when it comes to Trump. But anyway, well, let's move on. So the next page, let's see. Okay, what I'm referring to by the next page is this link, which is the St. Brice's Day Massacre. Okay, in ordering the St. Brice's Day massacre, all of the Danes in England, massacre of all of the Danes in England, Athelred the Unready, the king of England, observed that, quote, all the Danes who had sprung up in this island, sprouting like cockle among the wheat, were to be destroyed by a most just extermination. Okay, so these are some of the words of the king, Athelred, nicknamed Athelred the Unready. Okay, so here in his words, Athelred this is part of a royal charter in which he said these things. The charter also regards the burning of a church in the massacre in Oxford. And by the way, I have to go off on a tangent here. Oxford hints at X. God is cleverly using these names with X, in the letter X in them, to point to as symbolism for the mark. And because the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by an X, because the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav mark, or rather the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist in Ezekiel chapter 9 was a Tav letter, which was an X in ancient Hebrew, and the symbols, or rather the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are symbols for things, and the symbol for the Tav, the X, is a mark. Okay, well that's relevant because what God is communicating through all of this with this massacre on St. Brice's Day, and part of it being the Oxford massacre, is the coming massacre and politicide in America, and it will involve the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? Okay. Now, part of the St. Brice's Day massacre was this massacre in Oxford in which a church was burned down with the Danes inside and then was rebuilt to become a famous church in Oxford now, a famous cathedral. And that's relevant because that's part of the royal charter here, in which the king Athelred is using these words that come from Jesus' words regarding the tares and the wheats. So the Danes had sprung up, as he put it, like cockle, in other words, tares among the wheat. It's a direct reference to the Bible. And they were to be destroyed, and that's also, like Jesus' words, the tares would be destroyed after the harvest. So the tares grow up among the wheat, and Jesus tells his disciples to not cut the tares down, for if you do, you will also at the same time damage the wheat. The course of action is to wait until the end of the age, at which time God will collect the tares and throw them into the fire. The tares is a metaphor for quote-unquote Christians that aren't Christians, of which there are many, many today. Many, many, many. There are a lot of tares, but as in the parable in the Bible says, the tares in the Bible are said to have been seeded by Satan. So anyway, their purpose is to deceive. Satan's function in God's creation is to deceive, and the tares are deception. They are the quote-unquote Christians that are not Christians but are tares. Incidentally, speaking of updating this history and the parable of the wheat and the tares to our current time and the coming politicide, these quote-unquote Christian tares will be on the wrong side, and they will be persecuting. They will be part of the team, the blue team, right? You know what I mean? The blue, red state teams. They will be part of the blue team that will be responsible for the genocide of God's true faithful the wheat that's coming. Okay, the person. So, okay. So that's why St. Bryce's Day is connected to all of this. It's biblical because of the king's use of this metaphor in the massacre. Now, the St. Bryce's Day massacre is perfect symbolism for the coming targeting and rounding up and massacre of God's faithful. So what's coming is a rounding up, clearly confirmed through other signs. I'll try to limit my going off onto tangents to explain things. But anyway, there's a coming roundup and a targeting, and it'll be precise, like the targeting of Danes. And by the way, I read the history, and it wasn't indiscriminate targeting of Danes. It was the Danes that had arrived recently, those that were members of the Danish king's army, and the disloyal members of the King Athelred's army that sided with the Danes. And from what I read in the history, it wasn't a huge number of people that died. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The number of deaths doesn't matter in terms of relevance for what I'm talking about here anyway. And so, but there will be a targeting and a rounding up. That's, for example, alluded to with a recent sign regarding Trump's instruction to his heads of cabinet regarding the firing of employees in these agencies, and to not fire so indiscriminately, but surgically, as the metaphor was used at the time, a surgeon's scalpel instead of an axe. Okay? Why that's relevant is because of the coming precise targeting of true Christians and the dissidents, the true Christians and the true conservatives, through a means that will enable it to be precise and not swaths of people from a particular geographical location or something to that effect. That will all be accomplished through the mark of the Antichrist, which is what is described in Bible prophecy as being the big thing that will determine who is and who isn't with God. Those who take it are going to hell, as prophecy says. Okay? And by the way, the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. And you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into it again, but nowhere in the Bible does it say that one cannot repent. But it is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It was the mark. You're on your way to hell unless you repent. If you are a quote-unquote Christian and you took it, make no mistake, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God, and it is to prove what I have just said. Wake up and learn some things, because you have been brainwashed, but willingly. You're not going to be you're not going to be forgiven for the lack of knowledge, because you willingly closed your mind. Okay? For spiritual reasons, in fact. Okay? I'm again talking about why a quote-unquote Christian would be deceived into being part of the blue team. Okay, well, actually, I shouldn't apologize for going off onto this tangent, because this is what this video is about. So, really. There is no such thing as a quote-unquote Christian on the left. It is an oxymoron. And there are good reasons for that. The left is evil, and it is anti-Christian. It is anti-Christ. Socialism in all of its variations, including nationalistic socialism, which was the Nazis. The Nazis weren't a right-wing party. They were socialists. All of it is anti-biblical. It's anti the Bible because of the theme that is the Bible and life of slavery versus freedom. It is not true to say that people naturally crave freedom. They don't. They naturally crave to be taken care of. They crave the government to take care of them. It's principles that are founded in ethics from the Bible that engender a person to desire freedom over slavery. It's morals and ethics that tells and informs a person that it is wrong and a sin to extort people with high taxes, with a threat of a gun to their head, which is essentially what it is. You don't pay your taxes, you go to jail, no matter how high the government determines they should be. That's theft. Doesn't matter how rich the person is. And furthermore, I don't want to make this a video about free market capitalism, but it's part of why the left is evil. And the more left a society has, the more antichrist it is, and the more disastrous it becomes. Currently, Western countries like the Anglosphere countries are a cut flower civilization. Long ago, the flower was cut from its roots, and it takes a while for it to look like it's dying. It's really looking like it's dying for those who have the eyes to see right now. But it looks fine it still looks fine to some people. But it's a cut flower civilization, and I would say the majority of people in the most populous regions of Canada, for example, no longer have the same values as their antecedents, as their ancestors did a long time ago, who created the nation. Likewise, within the blue states in America, which is why we have our culture war today. It's not really accurate. Well, it is a culture war, but it's also a civil war. But it's not only a civil war, it's a religious war. Unlike the Civil War in the 1800s, both sides of the Civil War shared common values. Today, the two sides have absolutely nothing in common. They agree on absolutely nothing important. They are complete opposites, and that's because it's spiritual, and one side is Antichrist. And it is the values of the Bible, Christian values, that founded the nation. So there's one side that is against the founding values of the nation, and the other side is trying their best to fight back, including atheists that don't understand yet that the Bible, that the Christian God of the Bible is the true God, but they do instinctively know that what is happening is rotten, and they're fighting alongside those that do believe in the Bible. I do not think that the judgment coming will come down. Like I said, what we're talking about in this video are tares, quote unquote Christians that are not Christian. You are not a Christian if you are a blue team member. There's absolutely no excuse either, especially if you live in America with all of the media. In places like Canada and Europe, their conservative movements are a long way behind that of America from the very beginning, in truth, but from the beginning of their societies. But in terms of modern times, and that is because of the media. I mean, But in America, there's all kinds of conservative media. But the blue team, nonetheless, is living in a bubble. They only get the liberal side, the blue team side. Whereas people on the right know fully well their points of view and their arguments because it's the mainstream media. So one side is getting two sides of the story, and the blue team is only getting one side of the story, and it's not the side of the story that's intellectual. It's based on emotions. That's why more women vote Democrat than men, for example. It's all based on feelings. And its arguments are conducive for sound bites or little snippets on in the mainstream network news. But you could go, but even in terms of like 5-minute little stories on NPR, it's nothing, right? Conservative arguments, when they are heard, anyone that listens to conservative arguments is no longer on the blue team, and that's why the blue team won't debate and can't. This is why they resort to censorship, because their arguments are pale. They're not based in facts or reality. It's all based on emotional, utopian vision, ideology, feelings, and it's feminine. So anyway, what I want to do is get back to the story of what God is communicating with these prophetic signs. I think I elaborated enough for now. So again, we're talking about the wheat and the tares. And that's why I had to go into a little bit about what tares are, because what Jesus was talking about were those that looked or called themselves quote unquote Christians, but aren't. And who are they? Well, in large part, they are quote unquote Christians on the blue team. There's no excuse for that. It's abhorrent. It's disgraceful. Now, so the St. Brice's Day Massacre, back to what I wrote here. The St. Brice's Day Massacre is perfect symbolism for the coming targeting and rounding up and massacre of God's faithful. So that's why God is using this. I'm about to explain how he is pointing to it through his signs. But first of all, is the St. Brice's Day Massacre a prophetic sign in itself? Yes, it is. It occurred on the date November 13th in 1002. The date 1113 hints at 113 this year. And I will explain how the year 1002 hints at the date 12 this year, January 2nd. In other words, the date of the St. Brice's Day Massacre, as I'll explain, is pointing to these two dates in January this year, January 2nd and January 13th. Okay? Again, through the date 1113, it hints at 113, and the year 1002 hints at the date 12. Now, G113, which God uses in his signs, this isn't the only example. That's the beauty of a developed pattern of signs that's only being explained on this channel. You can recognize these things very quickly. That's because God is using in a pattern throughout his signs G113. G113 is the word in the Greek concordance for lawless, wicked, unprincipled men. On the date 113 this year, the moon occulted Mars. Again, this connected with the new moon on January 1st. So, and Sheriff Luna and the Chinese New Year and Half Moon Bay shootings. Okay. Let me just elaborate a little bit here, because I wrote this back in January, and to whom I'm writing to would have been recent information. So they would have understood without me having to explain it all again. Now, January 1st, so God is using these moon signs because, as I mentioned, God is using these moon signs to point to the half moon phase on March 22nd this year as being the date for the predicted dirty bombs. Now, what I'm about to just explain is a couple of methods in which he did that, including this January 1st date. Now, January 1st, there was an explosion. That was the explosion of the Cybertruck at the entrance to the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, in which 7 people were injured. It was the same day that the Lightning truck, the Ford Lightning model truck, drove through the crowd in New Orleans at the New Year's Eve party, but it was on New Year's Day on the date 1/1 in the early morning, and killed 7 people and injured 7 people. So 7 deaths, 7 injured, and then on the same day, 7 more injured with the explosion. Now, I'm not going to make this video about January 1st. See, the thing about explaining God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is that it is extremely difficult to explain because it's all interconnected. It's a web. And when you try to explain one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. It's extremely difficult. Now, I would ideally have downloaded all of the information into your brain about January 1st to confirm what I'm saying about January 1st, but I can't do that. And so anyway, January 1st was this date of the new moon, which was quite interesting because it coincided with the first day of the year. The new moon coincided with the new year. And that also brings up the mass shootings on the Chinese Lunar New Year in 2023, and which was followed 2 days later by the second mass shooting in the Chinese community in California. Second shooting in 2 days apart, and that other shooting was on 2 farms, mushroom farms in Half Moon Bay. Mushroom being symbolic of a mushroom cloud, but I don't expect a mushroom cloud, but it's only symbolism for the coming nuclear weapons grade material that'll be in the dirty bombs, but also it's 2 farms because there's 2 expected dirty bombs. Anyway, half moon, Chinese Lunar New Year, you get the idea here. God is pointing to the half moon. Now, the sheriff who was responsible for the investigation over the shooting in Los Angeles County on the Chinese Lunar New Year, his name is Robert Luna, and Luna is Spanish for moon. Okay, now, January 1st. Well, that was the day of the, I can't get into it. It's just let's just put it this way. It was an important date. That's enough for this, okay? You have to take my word for some things. So it was a very important date, relevant because it's all interconnected, but I won't explain it. January 1st, okay? New year, new moon. Then Sheriff Luna was in the news 4 + 4 days later for having said that parts of Los Angeles had looked like an atomic bomb had been dropped on it. Well, that's interesting because he, was part of that sign that I just mentioned that involved the mushroom farms. Okay, and by the way, the mass shootings in God's signs are symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. The things that come out of guns and go into people, the bullets, are symbolic of the things that come out of things and are put into people. Okay, and and what we are talking about is a coming massacre through the use of the mark of the Antichrist, as I mentioned, which, by the way, will involve food. And these were farms which grow food. Because the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced in the time of food rationing through digital programmable currency. The food will be rationed to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? Now, so Sheriff Luna brings up this moon symbolism in connection with the expected explosions because he said that Los Angeles looked like a bomb had been dropped on it. Now, the reason for 4 + 4 days from the 1st, well, now I realize that I do need to elaborate more on what happened on the 1st. That was the day that Pope Francis opened one of the doors, and the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for door. And Dalat is the name of the letter too, from which we derive ultimately the word door. Now, it's the fourth, and so this part of these signs that God is communicating about regarding the opening of the door to the demonic realm. That's what I don't want to get into in this video. But I need to confirm for you the 4 plus 4 days, because the 44th president is the Antichrist, who will be a part of the deception of the demons pretending to be aliens after the door is opened. Now, but it was also the fourth door that Pope Francis, because he opened 5 doors. It was the fourth one. Okay, and let's see. It's been a long time, so, be patient with me here. And like I say, every day is chock full of signs and, learning. So it's literally it feels like 3 years ago, the beginning of January. But also, another amazing thing is that 4 days after the fourth door was opened was January 5th. And that was the day of the Golden Globe Awards in Los Angeles County, and which was very prophetic, including the mention of fire. The woman who hosted the show said the speeches of the people that won the awards were on fire or something to that effect. And she also mocked God. Probably you've seen that clip, maybe you haven't. She said there have been, of the winners of the awards, 3 of them have been, I don't know what. But she spelled it out. There was a 3 and an 11, which again is why it was confirmation of pointing to the date 113 and this connection to the St. Brice's Day Massacre, as I'm explaining, because she listed a category of winners. I forget how she did it, but 3 of the winners were such and such category, and then 11 of the other winners were in this category, and then there was a big 0 for the number of people. That's what it was. She said that in their acceptance speeches, 3 gave a shout out to their mother, 11 of them gave a shout out to their wife or something like that, and then 0 people gave a shout out to God. It was a mocking of God, and she said after that something about this godless town in a sarcastic joke. This godless town. And so this mocking of God at the Golden Globe Awards was on the 5th, and then 4 days after that was when Sheriff Luna said that the fire had caused parts of Los Angeles to look like an atomic bomb had been dropped. Okay, so that's why the 4 plus 4 days from the fourth door being opened on the 1st, on the day of the new moon. Do you see how it's all connected? Now, the thing about the Golden Globes too is it was on the 5th, and it was the 5th annual award. One of the awards within the awards was the Carol Burnett Award for, I don't know, I think, comedy or something to that effect, like best comedy or something. So it was the 5th annual Carol Burnett Award, part of the Golden Globe Awards. Or was it the Golden Globe Awards? Yeah, it was the Golden Globe Awards, right? Yeah. And anyway, it's amazing beyond words. I looked it up. The Carol Burnett show, in its intro, has 5 doors. Mind-blowing, mind-blowing. I had an intuition. I said somehow, it was obviously the Holy Spirit, I wondered if the intro to the Carol Burnett show involved doors in any way. And sure enough, it was all about doors. The entire intro to the Carol Burnett show is about opening doors. There's the cartoon character of Carol Burnett, and she opens the door into the studio, and then she has, I think 3 co-hosts in the comedy sketches of the Carol Burnett show. So one by one, she opens the 3 other doors, and then the final door is the door to the stage. And so it's 5 doors total. And the Pope opened 5 doors. And the fifth door was on the 5th too. That was the day of the 5th door. That's right. That's why that was so amazing beyond words, because it was 5 doors. It was on the 5th, but it was the day of the opening of the 5th door that the Pope had opened. By the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Pope did this ritual this year, a once in 25-year ritual where he goes around Rome and opens these doors to the cathedrals or whatever, right? But it was the 5th of five doors that he opened on the 5th, the day of the 5th Carol Burnett Award in the Carol Burnett show is all about the beginning of it, opening 5 doors. Okay, so we're making some progress here. We got the new moon on the 1st. We got the 4th door opened. 4 days later, we have the 5th door opened and the Carol Burnett Award for 5 and for the 5th one, and then it was also the beginning of her show was 5 doors. And then 4 days after that, another 4 days, was the day that Sheriff Luna did his thing with the statement about the atomic bomb. And then 4 days after that was the January 13th date, the date on which the comet reached its perihelion, which again was alluded to with the 11 and 3 in the Globe and Globe Awards, 4 plus 4 days earlier. Again, the 44th president is the Antichrist. But the Golden Globe winner recipients receive a statue of Atlas. Atlas holding the globe on his back. So the statue is about an atlas. It's the Atlas Awards, if you will. And that's astounding because we were talking about the G3 Atlas comet G3 Atlas. All right? Now, the day that the comet was first discovered was exactly 4 times 4 months after Sheriff Luna was made the first Hispanic sheriff of the Los Angeles County. God uses firsts for signs because the first affirmative action president is the Antichrist. Now, okay. So, in other words, now, as you can see, I've connected the new moon to the day that the moon occulted Mars and the perihelion of the comet. And the comet, again, connects to all of this too, because it's an Atlas comet. And we're talking about this connection to the Golden Atlas Awards, right? The Golden Globe Awards. Okay. Now, on January 13th, comet G3 Atlas, connected with the Golden Globe Atlas Statue Award, reached perihelion. The comet was discovered on the day that Biden shouted about 2 times 3 deaths at the bridge. I'll explain that in a second, but that was the day that the comet was first discovered, and that was exactly 4 times 4 months, as in the 44th president, after Luna took office, on the day of the death of the actress who played an alien in Star Trek. Okay, we have to pause again here. It's because I need to explain that the way in which God's signs works, which is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is that it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know that these are the numbers that he uses to confirm his signs and connections because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And the reason is that the 44th president is the basketball president who wore 23 in high school. And so from the day that Joe Biden shouted out 2 times 3 deaths, which incidentally was exactly 2 times 3 months after the death of the baseball player who played his 23-year career in Baltimore, and the bridge was in Baltimore. Anyway, just to give you a little, a second witness to the 2 times 3 deaths significance, Okay? It literally is 2 times 3 deaths, not 6 deaths. Well, because, yeah, it is 6 deaths, and it was 6 months exactly after the death of the baseball player from Baltimore, but the baseball player from Baltimore played for 23 years in Baltimore. He played his entire career in Baltimore. One of the greatest to ever play, and there's so much, you know what? I just started pulling the web. Wait a second, let's stop that. I'm not going to explain how that's relevant, because you know what? Here's how it works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses, but to explain a second witness, you have to explain the second and third witnesses to that. And then to explain that, you got to explain the second and third witnesses to that, and then the second and third witnesses to those things, and it just goes off into infinity, literally. It's impossible to explain. It's not impossible. I'm doing my best. So anyway, okay. So 2 times 3 deaths pairs with the exact 4 times 4 months after Luna took office. Now, in January, I've connected Luna to the comet. And I've also now connected Luna's taking of office to the comet, because it was discovered exactly 4 times 4 months after Luna took office. Now, let's see. On the date 1-2, famous amateur astronomer, Terry Lovejoy. So he's like a celebrity, if you will, in the astronomy community. He's like the most famous amateur astronomer, Terry Lovejoy. Okay? So God is using these figures, these symbolic people, for his symbolic messages. So this would be a good example. It's an amazing example, actually. But to give you how it works in principle, a certain person will symbolize a certain thing that God is wishing to communicate. So Terry Lovejoy is being used here by God. And that makes sense given that he's like a very famous astronomer, but the most famous amateur astronomer. Quote, so Terry Lovejoy wrote about Comet G3 Atlas, the comet we're talking about, on January 2nd, okay? He reported, quote, this is from the Wikipedia site, quote, Terry Lovejoy, quote, reported that the comet experienced an outburst, estimating its magnitude to be 3.7. And photographically at 3.2 visually, end quote. Now, 3.7 is prophetic because it hints at 3 sets of 7. And on the day that the comet was discovered, we had the profound 3 sets of 7. Because Joe Biden, another example like Terry Lovejoy, of God using someone for purposes for prophetic signs, Joe Biden, the acting president, was at the location of the bridge, which was in the 7th state and was built in 77. By the way, that baseball player who retired in 77, and at the time he was 7th in terms of career hits. 7th all-time in career hits. Another 3 sets of 7. Well, the 3 sets of 7 is relevant because of the book of Joshua and the Israelites enacting a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment, which made the collapse of the bridge such a symbolic sign. Okay, now, I mean, there's so much to say about the bridge, which I explain in other videos, and really I can't get off onto that tangent. But that's the significance of why so 3 sets of 7 is relevant. Actually, 3.2 is relevant too because the word bomb in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, is equal to 32, as is the name Obama. And Obama hints at Obama, as I explained in other videos. Terry Lovejoy reported an outburst. Okay? That's the significance here. He reported an outburst on this date 1-2, January 2nd, on the comet we are observing, which is symbolic of the opposite of love and joy. Okay? And also, Terry hints at tears. That's why God is using Terry Lovejoy. Terry hints at tears. It's part of this pattern that God is using with these names of or words that rhyme or resemble the word tears. It's not just an obscure thing. Like I say, it's all based on second and third witnesses. I don't just come up with these things out of a hat. There's reasons for why I know these things, including how, for example, God has been, prior to this, using words, names that resemble the word tear. So Terry hints at tears. Clear. It's clear, right? It is also symbolic of an explosion. That's what an outburst is. That's what it was on the comet. His report of the outburst, or explosion, if you will, on the date 1-2, hints at the year of the St. Brice's massacre in 1002. The targeted massacre symbolizes tears, as the king named Athelred the Unready, referred to the parable of the wheat and tares in his decree for the massacre. As in the book of Esther, the massacre began on the 13th of the month. So that's another thing here. That's another confirmation, another second witness that the St. Brice's Day massacre is biblical. It's part of a prophetic sign, because not only did the king talk about the parable of the wheat and the tares, but the date is astounding, because the massacre date in the Bible is also on the 13th, when the Jews were decreed to be massacred, just like the King Athelred made his decree to kill the Danes. The Jews in Persia were decreed to be gotten rid of also on 2 13th days of the month. I mean, the decree was made on the 13th of the month, and the decree said that the day for the massacre would also be on the 13th of a month. Okay, so that's why the St. Brice's massacre occurred on the 13th of a month. Now, the name Unready, so it's the name of the king is Athelred the Unready. The name Unready hints at the quote-unquote Christians who are unready and will end up with the tares. The following is the amazing second witness to the relevance of Terry Joy. Now we definitely need a second witness here. I've said that Terry Lovejoy's prophetic, but why? How do I know? It's more than just that he's a famous amateur astronomer. Okay? But when I confirm that he is relevant, that will in turn thereby confirm the relevance of his reporting of an outburst on the comet on the date 1-2, which would then in turn confirm the year of the St. Brice's massacre in the year 1002. So in other words, there's two sets of numbers with the St. Brice's Day massacre. We have the date, which is confirmed, the date 1113, and as I'm saying, it hints at 113 this year, but also Lovejoy hints at 1-2 because he reported on the date 1-2, and the St. Brice's Day massacre was in the year 1002. Okay? Now, so what's this? What is there more regarding Terry Lovejoy? After perihelion, this whole paragraph is from Wikipedia. After perihelion, the comet reappeared in the southern hemisphere. It became clearly visible with the naked eye on the 18th of January. No, it became clearly visible with the naked eye, and on the 18th of January, its tail was reported to be 4 degrees long, with its magnitude, while its magnitude was estimated to be negative 0.9, which is very bright, by the way. Magnitude works, the smaller the number, the brighter it is. However, on the 19th of January, Hungarian astrophotographer Lionel Magic, reported that a bright streamer appeared within the tail while its head became less prominent, indicating that the comet could have disintegrated. Reports of an earlier fragmentation event were recorded as early as January 12th. And while the exact cause of the comet's breakup were currently unknown, it is likely the intense solar heating during perihelion had caused jetting and outgassing from the nucleus, leading to its eventual fragmentation. Despite this, the comet retained the shape of its tail, now resulting in a quote-unquote headless comet similar to Comet Lovejoy in 2011. So the most famous amateur astronomer, Terry Lovejoy, has a very famous comet named after him. In fact, the comet of 2011. So the astronomers like to give a comet the title of the comet of a particular year. And so the comet of 2011 is the Comet Lovejoy, which obviously Terry Lovejoy discovered, which is why it's named after him, which is part of why he's arguably the most famous astronomer, amateur astronomer. And by the way, on that note, God is beautifully incorporating every aspect of culture you might think of into his big picture of science. He's egalitarian in that way, if you will. I mean, he's focused on America, don't get me wrong. He's not, DEI. The signs aren't in every country in the world. They're focused on America. But what I mean is every aspect of American culture, from all kinds of different aspects of pop culture to movies to sports. And now we have this example of the astronomy community being brought into the signs with Terry Lovejoy. Okay, so the comet Lovejoy, though, was also a headless comet. And it's not like an incidental detail. This is a detail that I'm quoting from the Wikipedia page regarding the synopsis of the comet G3 Atlas. In other words, on the Wikipedia page itself, Comet G3 Atlas is being compared to Comet Lovejoy. That right away, right there, is a confirmation that Lovejoy's description or his role in the G3 comet, Atlas comet, is relevant. And what was his role? He was the guy that discovered its outburst. He was the first to report the comet's outburst. What are we talking about in this video? We are talking about a predicted outburst. Explosions of dirty bombs on the day of the half moon, which is a celestial astronomical event. Okay. The comet became clearly visible to the naked eye, and the day of its perihelion, I think this is a typo, but the day of its perihelion, anyway, was the 13th, and again, that's like the symbolic date of a comet, right, is the date of its perihelion. Prior to January 19th, it was known that this date was a step in the trail of signs regarding the predicted nuclear or dirty bombs in New York City. January 19th was the day after the Lion's Den. I'm going to skip this part here, okay? So on January 19th, so what I'm saying is that God was ahead of time pointing to January 19th in terms of a prophetic explosion sign. The sign we received, part of it, involved another aspect of this Comet G3 Atlas. But as you can see, what I'm getting at here, this comet is about it becoming headless. Well, how did it become headless? From its nucleus fragmentating. And then the jetting and the outgassing, the outburst. It's all about the nucleus of the comet. But as I'll also explain in a second, I forget where it is now, there's a nuclear shadow. Okay, so the comet, prior to the fragmentation, there was reporting of the quote, what's called a nuclear shadow, a dark lane in the tail. So that's another amazing nuclear thing. So the nuclear shadow would have been a prelude to its fragmentation, I suppose, is how it works. It was like a heads up, because you started to see a dark lane in the tail, which was like an indicator of, I guess, what was coming, which was the fragmentation, the breaking up of the nucleus, right? And the outgassing and the outburst. But just prior to that, there was a nuclear shadow in the tail, what they call a nuclear shadow, a dark lane in the tail. That's more nuclear symbolism. And what are we talking about? We are talking about nuclear weapons-grade material in bombs exploding. And what I am saying also is that God was pointing to January the 19th ahead of time in terms of all of this prediction for the explosion in Manhattan. And then on the 19th, January 19th, we had a relevant sign regarding the comet, which is all about its nucleus, how it became headless because of its nuclear shadow and the nucleus breaking up, etc., and the outgassing and outburst of the nucleus. Okay, so on January 19th, Hungarian, that hints at Hungary, as in hungry for food, as in the coming food rationing that will be used to target the massacre, the politicide, the dissidents, the MAGA, the true conservatives, true Christians, the enemies of the blue team through the rationed food. So that's why God is bringing in Hungarian astronomer, okay? It's not just an astronomer. He's Hungarian. That's part of the Wikipedia description here. He's a famous, astrophotographer, and his name is Lionel, which hints at lion. First reported, that's not relevant without me explaining other things, but anyway, first reported that Comet G3 Atlas had the visible hallmarks of becoming fragmented. The fragmentation was likely caused by outgassing from the nucleus. So this is like the conclusion. Okay. The Hungarian is like, okay, this is what happened. What's going on here is he's reporting that he's the guy that says, look, what we have here is a fragmented comet. Comet G3 Atlas had the visible hallmarks of becoming fragmented. And that was because of the outburst. Okay? So, in other words, the comet's no longer a comet, which is significant, right? That's a symbolic. It's like the end of the comet, if you will. And this is the guy. And he's relevant because he's from Hungary. Okay, but also the fragmentation, let me see. And he's also calling out the nucleus. The fragmentation was likely caused by outgassing from the nucleus. Again, more nuclear explosion symbolism. Prior to this, the comet was reported to have a nuclear shadow, a dark lane in its tail. The outburst, the nuclear shadow, and the outgassing of the nucleus that caused the comet's fragmentation are nuclear explosion signs that we expected for January 19th. And again, this is relevant because this is like the end of the comet, if you will. Look, it's fragmented. It's, okay. In conjunction with the walls of security collapse signs in the Trump victory rally. So this was the day before his inauguration when Trump had his victory rally in the arena in Washington, D.C. There was so much that God was using to point to that ahead of time. And this sign is about the collapse of security. It was also because it's Trump. And Trump is someone God is using to point to the trumpets that were blown by the Israelites before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. That's why Trump's election campaigns and his first presidency were synonymous with his border wall of security, as is his second presidency. But the 2.0 presidency is about border wall of security on steroids. Because all of these tariffs, that's another hint at terrors, by the way, it's all about the border. The tariffs are about the border. So it's not just about the illegal immigrants anymore. It's about the tariffs and everything to do with the border. And Greenland and Panama Canal are also about securing security and therefore the border. But it's like, in that sense, the North American Monroe Doctrine border, right? So it's all about integrity because of a border, which is what a border does. It gives the entity integrity. Every one of our cells in our body has a border. God designed borders. The people that are against borders are against God. Borders are healthy. They're a necessary thing. The left is all about abolishing borders and distinctions. Borders are also symbolism for distinctions. The left is on a mission to abolish the distinctions, such as the distinction between God and his creation, man and God, woman and man, the distinction between the profane and decent, and the distinction between man and animal. This is all the left. In other words, they're anti-God. These are all God's creative distinctions. The first chapter in the book of Genesis is all about borders. It's all about distinctions. It's all about let it divide. He divided the day from the night and the water from the earth, and on and on in the chapter regarding creation. The left is anti-God's creation, symbolically through all of their anti-borders. I mean, that anyone could be against building a wall to protect America's border is mind-boggling. That person is a sick person, but yet that's half the country. What in the world is going through their mind? It's wrong to build a wall on the border to stop the flow of illegals into the nation in order to protect the nation and the people within it. It's all about Satan bringing down America. Anti-Americanism, which is the reason why they wouldn't want to build a wall, because there are anti-Americans in America, not just in Canada and Europe. Anti-Americanism is a symptom of demonism. It's from Satan. It's spiritually evil. I mean that literally. And the prediction in this video will prove this. That's the purpose of this prediction. Make no mistake. I'm speaking truth when I say that, and the prediction will prove it. I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. Anti-Americanism is a spirit of Satan, a spirit of Antichrist in general. So that's why, because the right is racking their minds like, what in the world is with these people, right? How in the world could they be against a border wall? And it drives them nuts. And it just further enrages people and enhances the culture war. because the left has lost its mind, and we have to do everything we can. But when we have half the country actively seeking to destroy America through things like not building a border wall, you have to wonder what's going through their mind. Well, the thing is, you can't rationalize it. You can't unreason that wasn't reasoned in the first place. It's spiritual, whether they recognize it or not. Their problem, the problem, is Satan. And Satan is the one who wants to bring down the border wall and flood it with people from all over the world that don't share our values, in order to destroy America, God's nation, God's Gentile nation. And that's why. That's why they hate Israel and they hate America. The only two nations in world history that are founded in a relationship with God. And the Bible. Okay, so let's get back to what I was saying here. So the Trump rally. So I went off on quite a tangent there to explain the Trump rally. But the Trump rally, they were shouting, right? So when the Israelites blew the trumpets, they also shouted before the walls of security collapsed. So in other words, this Trump victory rally, and by the way, the Israelites were victorious over the Jerichoites, or however you would call them, the inhabitants of Jericho. They blew the trumpets and they shouted, and then they defeated, as in victorious, the inhabitants of Jericho. So the victory rally was about shouting and well, okay, I don't know if they blew trumpets, literally. Well, no, they did. Actually, they did. Because if I recall, at the victory rally, the YMCA came on. That's the reason for the whole YMCA phenomenon. It's a prophetic sign from God because it's a trumpet song. The song heavily uses trumpets. And it's trump. In archaic English, the word trump means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. So at the victory rally, there was shouting and trumpets, which was the sign that God was saying would happen in advance. And like I'm saying, God pointed to January 19th in advance. And I'm 98% certain that January 19th was recognized before it was learned that there would be a victory rally. Because from what I recall, Trump announced the victory rally just a few days before the day. Okay, so, January 19th was recognized longer prior to that. And so, but the victory rally ended up being the sign we were expecting in advance, this collapse of security, which is related to the bombs. But there's more to it, and I explain it in other videos, how the victory rally is all part of that. Now, having got into that, that's the second witness to the other sign, which was the sign involving the comet on this day, which was when it was officially reported, if you will, to have been fragmented due to the nucleus. That brings us the nuclear aspect into the signs expected in advance of January 19th, as in nuclear explosions and collapse of security. Because when the dirty bombs explode in New York City, it'll be a collapse of security, which was warned of through the events of 9/11. In 2001, and this is the follow-up, the collapse of security, and that is symbolized with the victory rally in conjunction with the news about the comet's nucleus having caused it to fragment, or the nucleus fragmenting. Okay, now this also perfectly aligns with how January 13th was a step in the same trail of signs. Again, on January 13th, the comet reached perihelion and first became visible. No, I don't know if that's correct, but anyway, on the day, and that was the day that the moon occulted Mars. Mars in God's signs is symbolic for war, because in ancient astronomy it is. And the dark lane in the tail was reported on January 3rd. And the comet became marginally visible to the naked eye on that day, on January 3rd. January 3rd was 4 times 4 days before January 19th, and January 13th was 2 times 3 days before January 19th. A pairing of 23 and 44, as I explained earlier. Quote, despite this fragmentation, the comet retained the shape of its tail, now resulting in a, quote, headless, quote, unquote, comet, similar to Comet Lovejoy in 2011. Okay, so again, this sentence is a quote from the Wikipedia page. And again, this comet is compared with Comet Lovejoy through it becoming headless after it approached the sun. And here is a quote from the Bible. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them who were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, nor received the mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Revelation 24. So this is a mention of the beheading of God's faithful, as in the headless comet, which, as I explained, points back to the St. Bryce's Day massacre, which is all about what is described in this Bible passage of those who had become beheaded for their witness of Jesus. And you can be sure that the tares will not be of those who will become beheaded. In fact, they will be on the blue team enforcing the mark of the Antichrist. Terry, as in Tares, Lovejoy, reported the outburst on January 2nd. January 2nd, 2025 was exactly 157 months after the announcement of the discovery of Comet Lovejoy by Terry Lovejoy, and this comet's aphelion is 157 astronomical units. That's amazing beyond words. That confirms this January 2nd date, with Terry Lovejoy reporting about G3 Atlas's outburst. Okay, now Terry Lovejoy's comet has an aphelion. In other words, it reaches its furthest point from the sun in 157 astronomical units, but the date of the discovery of Comet Lovejoy was exactly 157 months before Lovejoy had the prophetic sign regarding this new comet, this recent comet, on January 2nd. And again, that in turn pointed or hinted at the year 1002. In other words, this 157 months connection to the comet that had 157 astronomical units is confirmation that the date 12 hints at the year 1002 with the St. Bryce's Day massacre. This 157 months was also exactly 13 years and 1 month. As Comet Lovejoy, okay, and that, by the way, would hint at the date 113 when the comet G3 Atlas reached its perihelion. As Comet Lovejoy was announced on the 16th anniversary of the SOHO satellite's launch, it became known as the, quote, the Great Birthday Comet of 2011. That's amazing. And because it was visible from Earth during the Christmas holiday, it was nicknamed the Great Christmas Comet of 2011. Lovejoy was retroactively dubbed the Great Comet of 2011, unquote. 13 years and 1 month from the 4 times 4th anniversary of SOHO, the astronomer satellite, hints at the 44th president, King, who will decree a massacre like King Athelred the Unready on the date 1113. That's a typo. Okay, so do you get this now? We have more confirmation. We are identifying the Antichrist here, because the comet that I've already established is prophetic, the Terry Lovejoy comet, was announced. Its discovery was announced on the anniversary of the satellite, and then it was named the birthday comet because of that. This is a big deal. It's not trivial that it was announced on the day of the anniversary of the SOHO satellite. The SOHO satellite is about astronomy, right? And so the astronomers called the comet the birthday comet. But it was the 4 times 4th anniversary, as in the 44th president, who will decree the massacre like King Athelred. Terry Lovejoy's comet Lovejoy was the first Creutzfeldt group comet discovered by ground-based observation in 40 years. It had an observation arc of 40 days. The tares will be weeded out through a period of testing that is symbolized with the number 40, but also the 40 years and 40 days aspect of the Lovejoy comet is further confirmation of the 44th president. And again, it was announced exactly 4 times 4 years after the launch of the SOHO satellite. That's amazing. Terry Lovejoy discovered Comet Lovejoy on November 27th, 2011. So you get where I'm going here, right? Or where God is going here. God is really now drilling into the Comet Lovejoy. In other words, God is using in Comet G3 Atlas not only for the prediction for the dirty bombs, but he's using it to point back to the Terry Lovejoy comet. Clearly, right? Because I just established Terry Lovejoy's aspect or role in the G3 comet was exactly 157 months after the discovery of the Lovejoy comet, which has an AU, astronomical unit, of 157. Okay, so clearly God is pointing to the Terry Lovejoy comet. Now therefore there's more to the story, which I'll now explain. Terry Lovejoy discovered Comet Lovejoy on November 27th, 2011. Exactly 1,400 days. And we're going to have to go through this little bit by little bit. 1,400 days because there were 14 cows in Joseph's dream. The dream that Joseph interpreted of the king of Egypt, and the king of Egypt is symbolism for the Antichrist king. This is why, for example, the Maasai tribe in Kenya, right near where Obama was born, after 9/11, donated 14 cows to America. It was a big viral story at the time. The Maasai have no idea about the modern world, right? So they say, well, okay, we heard about this thing that happened. We're going to donate 14 of our cows, all right? But that's all because of the 14 cows, and Kenya being, symbolic of East Africa and close to Egypt. Well, 1,400 days is also exactly 200 weeks, but that is also 90 plus 110 weeks. And God pairs 9 and 110 together in his signs to confirm the signs and connections. And these numbers hint at 9/11. 110 stories. Wall Street was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security, and I'll leave it at that and not explain any more, because I've explained it many other times in other videos. But this also is 33,600 hours. That's relevant because G336 is the Greek word in the concordance that means to put to death, murder, as in the coming massacre. That's symbolized by the St. Bryce's Day massacre. But there's also what I'm about to explain. This is also 2,016,000. That hints at 216. 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. And Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. This 1,400 days, this 200 weeks is also exactly 2 times 23 months. 46 months, in other words. 46 is the 4 times 4th semi-prime number, a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, and God uses these. This is the 4 times 4th semi-prime number, which obviously also hints at Obama. So all of these things here are hinting at Obama, right? As I've explained, even the 1400 because of the 14 cows, 9/11 because of the 44 deaths on Flight 93, and the Antichrist king will be putting people to death in the massacre. The Antichrist was born on this day. Also, the name Barak is equal to 216 in English gematria. And, okay, so now 4 times 4th semi-prime number of months. This is also 3 years and 10 months. Okay, now what am I connecting it to? Again, I'm connecting the date that Comet Lovejoy was discovered. It is all of these numbers after the death of Indonesia's president, General Suharto, on January 27th, 2008. Suharto targeted his communist opposition in a massacre of millions of people. It's one of the biggest massacres of the 20th century. That is the Forgotten Massacre. And that's why the connection, incidentally, of 33,600, which hints at G336, to put to death to murder. Suharto murdered his communist opposition. Okay? And like I said earlier, God uses these people, but or I didn't say this earlier, but God uses the deaths of these people. God uses people for symbolism for things, like I mentioned, but he also uses a date of their death to symbolize that particular person. Okay, so that's why the date of Suharto's death is how God would incorporate Suharto, and thereby the theme of genocide or politicide into his signs. Because the Suharto massacre was a politicide. It was a political genocide, which is exactly what's going to happen. The coming genocide will be a politicide in America, with the blue team committing genocide on true conservatives and Christians. But don't worry, they lose in the end. They're going to hell. Like I read earlier, those who will suffer will live eternity with Christ. Okay. So, Obama and his mother moved with his stepfather to Indonesia after he was recalled after the massacre. That's why Obama, the 44th president, grew up in Indonesia for 4 years. It's because his stepfather was recalled by the leadership of Indonesia back to Indonesia from his time. I think he either was studying or I think he was a teacher. Anyway, he had to come back because of the outcome of the massacre. In other words, Obama moved to Indonesia right after the massacre because God is pointing or using that massacre, the reason why Obama moved to that nation, in order to point to the massacre that Obama will lead, just like General Suharto. Which incidentally is why Suharto died in 2008, during the rise of Obama to the presidency. Okay, so 2 times 23 months, remember I said it was 46 months, 4 times 4th semi-prime number. It's also 2 times 23 months. 2 times 23 months hints at pairs of 23 chromosomes. And that's the mark of the Antichrist, alters a person's chromosomes, which is what marks them. Change their chromosomes, they are no longer God's the way God created them. Terry's, as in tears, okay, Terry's discovery on November 27th, 2011, was also 2 years and 23 days after the election of the 44th president. Okay, so you see, the discovery of the comet, Lovejoy's comet, was exactly 2 times 23 months after the death of Suharto. And the discovery was also 2 years and 23 days after the election of the 44th president. So Terry Lovejoy's comet points to Suharto and Obama. And I just explained how Suharto and Obama are related in terms of history, but also prophecy. And it's amazing because the 2 times 23, or the 2 years and 23 days, or the 2 times 23 months, is how Obama will conduct his massacre, his politicide, through the mark of the Antichrist, or rather the restriction of rationed food, through the mark of, and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through the restricting of buying and selling food, which changes a person's pairs of 23 chromosomes. Okay? Let's see. 3 years and 10 months hints at G31 in the Greek concordance, which is the Greek word for message or announcement, which hints at the announcement of Lovejoy's comet on the 4 times 4th anniversary of Soho, and the coming announcement, decree, by the 44th president of a politicide massacre like in Indonesia. Therefore, the massacre in Indonesia, and by the way, therefore, the massacre in Indonesia connects to the massacre in England and Comet G3 Atlas. I've connected Lovejoy to the Indonesia massacre. You've seen, that's clear, right? Now, as I explained earlier, I also connected Lovejoy to the massacre in England. This would be why the name Lovejoy. It's a play. It's like a contrast. God is used. What is more in contrast to the evil of a Holocaust or a genocide? Lovejoy, right? So, okay, so where was I here? So therefore, the massacre in Indonesia connects to the massacre in England. Therefore, through Lovejoy, I've connected God has connected the Indonesia massacre to the massacre in England through Comet G3 Atlas and Lovejoy, whose tail was reported to be fragmented on January 19th in conjunction with TikTok going dark. That was the day that TikTok went dark. I forgot to mention that. The reason why that's relevant, that was a major prophetic sign. Like again, I explained, we expected these signs long before January 19th. And one of the signs was TikTok going dark. So there's the big story about TikTok, right? And how there's the controversy of whether or not it should be allowed to remain or not. But it came to a kind of climax on the 19th when it went dark. TikTok users could no longer use TikTok. That's because TikTok time is up. Because the victory rally at the arena, like I said, was symbolic of the walls of security collapsing. And prior to the Israelites blowing the trumpets and shouting, there was a 7-day lead up. It was like a tick-tock. It's like a countdown. And so God is using this tick-tock sign as symbolism for the countdown. Time is up. Going dark. Furthermore, what part of the judgment that's coming, which is predicted to occur on August 13th, is a solar flare that will knock out the power grid. Tick-tock, 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 going dark, time's up, destruction time for America, as was warned of on 9/11, which is incidentally why the date January 19th. It hints at 1/19 and 9/11. And the Trump victory rally and walls of security collapsing symbolism. Okay, so tail equals Revelation chapter 12. Let's see. So the tail was the indicator for how it had become fragmented. And tail is a big part of Book of Revelation prophecy regarding the end and the Antichrist. Okay, and also G3, it hints at 7 and 3, because G is the 7th letter, and that hints at 3 sets of 7, which is more Joshua symbolism. As I explained, they enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed and before they blew trumpets. And we're talking about the Trump at victory rally with the trumpets and the YMCA dancing and singing. Okay. So you see, just to say it one more time, the Indonesia massacre, what I wanted to say earlier was that the Indonesia massacre was a politicide, and those that were killed were part of the communist rebellion against the central government. And that's also symbolism because Obama is a communist. Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization before he moved to Chicago in '85, the year that the May 19th Communist Organization was disbanded. The May 19th Communist Organization detonated a bomb in the Capitol building. That's why Obama hints at Obama. Also, the Beirut bombings, which hints at Barack Obama bombings, they occurred exactly 444 months after the first UN session. And the Beirut bombings were about the UN, the peacekeepers, United Nations. And 444 obviously hints at Barack, the 44th president. Barack bombings, Barack. Well, anyway, it's a fact, and I explain it in other videos. I'm not going to explain it here. But Barack Obama was part of the May 19th Communist Organization, and he was a member of the organization during the time, which was November 1983, that they blew up a bomb in the Capitol building. Wow. If what I'm saying is true, wow, right? Well, what I am saying is true, and the prediction will prove this. Believe me, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. It is to prove God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And therefore, it will prove the things that the big picture of signs, patterns, and connections has overwhelmingly confirmed, including the fact that Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization. God has told this story through his signs, overwhelmingly, in multiple ways. And when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which therefore proves that Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization. And once a communist, always a communist. That's like a rule, right? The only way a communist stops being a communist is if they have a life-changing rebirth in Christ. It's only if they become a born-again Christian that a communist repents for his communism. Because communism is evil, and the way to recognize that is if you have the Holy Spirit and you have the fear of the Lord and are a student of the Bible, etc. Obama still is a communist at heart. It's still in him. He's perhaps, if you will, pushed it down a little bit, or rather, if not, hidden it quite well. But he originally got into politics for the purpose of subverting the American system. Him and the guy that was responsible for his start in politics, Bill Ayers, who wrote his autobiography, Dreams from My Father. And that's not a conspiracy. You can find him in video saying that he did. He wrote the autobiography. It was their scheme to play on the fact that Obama has this heritage of Kenya, which is why Obama went to Kenya to visit his supposed relatives, which he knew weren't his relatives all along, because he knows who his real father is, which is Frank Marshall Davis. The Marshall hints at the coming martial law. Frank Marshall Davis was his biological father and mentor, who was a high-ranking member of the communist movement in Chicago and leader of the communist publication before he was sent to Hawaii to lead the communist movement in Hawaii. Obama's grandfather was in truth a CIA operative, and he was assigned to Hawaii to monitor the communist movement there, which is how Obama's mother, which is how the paths of Obama's mother and Frank Marshall Davis crossed. And Frank Marshall Davis seduced Obama's mother, 18-year-old mother, and knocked her up. And because Obama's mother was in rebellion against her parents because she was resentful for having been moved around so much and been moved away from her friends in Seattle. And she just wanted to get back to Seattle to go to study in university and be with her friends. And so Obama's grandfather feared for the loss of his job if it were learned that his daughter was knocked up by the leader of the communist movement. And so he devised the scheme to get Obama Sr. into to play the role of the father. And Obama's mother went along with it, and the deal was that she could go back to Seattle and study there. And Obama Sr. was brought over by the CIA as part of a program. It's not conspiracy, that's a fact. He was brought over part of a program to counter the communist movement in Kenya in order to educate the elites in America and make them Americanized, etc. And Obama, the deal he got out of it, Obama Sr., was that if he were to pretend to be Obama's mother's husband, he could then stay and pursue his doctorate, which he did. Which is also why the story of why it is, because it's common knowledge that Obama's mother and Obama Sr. barely spent any time together because they weren't really married. Is the reason. And but in order to make it look real for immigration, they devised the plan to go have the birth in Kenya. And so that's how Obama was in fact born in Kenya. And that's a really brilliant move, actually, because that really, rather than having the birth in the US, if you go to Kenya and have the birth, then you really do look like you're married. Okay? And so Obama was in fact born in Kenya, but Obama Sr. wasn't his father. Frank Marshall Davis was. And Frank Marshall Davis mentored Obama as a teenager. With the blessings of Obama's grandfather. He allowed the two to get together and all that, right? So that's the true history. I go into all that in order to partly to prove to you Obama's communist background. Because when Obama went to Colombia, he met Bill Ayers, who for him was like meeting a member of the Beatles, and because he had already become communist. And that's when he went under Bill Ayers' wing, and Bill Ayers saw an opportunity with Obama to get power in politics. And ultimately, they had the vision from the very beginning that he would become the president. And through Bill Ayers, Obama got his start by becoming the president of the law review at Harvard. He got into Harvard through Bill Ayers as well. Bill Ayers was the son of the extremely powerful CEO of the utility company for Illinois. And long story. And Bill Ayers' father was also a lefty. So they had it from the beginning, the plan. And Obama didn't get into Harvard on his merit or anything that he did. He never wrote anything, including for the law review. It was all affirmative action. But Obama had been trained in communist politics, and that's how he convinced the students at Harvard to make him the president. He knew how to play the game after having spent years in politics with, like I say, Bill Ayers and his father and everyone, right? So anyway, that's the long story short. So Obama is a communist, and the politicide in Indonesia, where the 44th president grew up for 4 years, was all about the elimination of communism, but that's symbolism for the reversal. Because the truth is the blue team is communist. It's modern day communism. The useful idiots that don't know that, the brainwashed masses aren't really recognizing necessarily how what their movement is rooted in communism. But like Stalin said, they're useful idiots for the cause. And so what we have coming is like the reversal, if you will, of what happened in Indonesia. Well, not that the Suharto side is symbolic of true Christians or the MAGA. Don't get me wrong. Okay, so that's enough of this paragraph, I think. I think we're getting close to the end of this video now. This connection to the present from the death of Suharto has been patiently waited for. So I've known about the significance of the politicide in Indonesia and how it connects to Obama and the death of Suharto prior to him becoming the president, Barack Obama, during the year of his rise, his death, and all of this, right? But now we have it connect with exactly to the Lovejoy comet, which, as I'm explaining, connects with the G3 Atlas comet, which connects to the predicted bombs, as in Obama, that's predicted for March 22nd. Now, so again, he died exactly the 4 times 4th semi-prime number of months before Terry's comet was discovered, which was announced on the 4 times 4th anniversary of SOHO, which confirms the 4 times 4th semi-prime number. That's the second witness. As I explained, that's how it works. Second and third multiple witnesses confirming a matter is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. The announcement of the comet with a 157 AU astronomical unit was 157 months exactly before Terry, as in TERS, reported the outburst on the comet. So you see, the Indonesia massacre connects to Terry's comet, and Terry's comet and Terry connect to the G Atlas comet. G3 Atlas and its reported outburst connects to the explosion on January 19th, which was the nuclear fragmentation of the comet, and that was in conjunction with the Terrio, Enrique Terrio, who was released on January 20th, and he is the symbolic guy of all of the others who were also incarcerated as part of the politicide. They were political prisoners of war, and they were released on this day, but the lead guy, or rather the symbolic guy, if you will, His name is Terrio, which hints at tears. And on the 20th, the tariffs were mentioned in the speech, and there's tariffs are coming. There was the first, the day of the beginning of the tariffs, which is also hinting at tears. All of this points to the parable of the wheat and the tares that was cited by King Alred the Unready in his decree for a targeted massacre. Okay, now, 270 is equal to 90 plus 90 plus 90. God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, which is incidentally why the Antichrist was inaugurated in 2009. Okay, the St. Bryce's Day Massacre on November 13th, 1002 was exactly the 270th super semi-prime number of months, in other words, 12,266 months exactly, before the perihelion of comet G3 Atlas on January 13th, when the moon occulted Mars, as in war, which was 40 years and 3 days after the release of U2's album War, which is 40 minutes and 3 seconds long. That's described in another video, but it's war confirmation of the Mars occultation by the moon on the day of the perihelion of the comet G3 Atlas comet, which connects profoundly with this super semi-prime number that hints at the number 9 after the St. Bryce's Day Massacre. So if there were any doubt, because I connected it in other ways as well, right? Again, Lovejoy, the date of his role in the comet with its outburst on 1-2, the date, which since at 1002. The perihelion through its massacre, 13th of the month, because in the book of Esther, the massacre was on the 13th of the month. And so was the St. Bryce's Day Massacre on the 13th of the month. But not only that, it was 1113, which hints at 113, as in January 13th this year. So those were the other ways, like I was saying. But now we also have this direct connection also with this exact 270th, in other words, 90 plus 90 plus 90th, super semi-prime number of months. That's amazing. The St. Bryce's Day Massacre was part of a war with the Danes, the Danish, if you will. And again, it connects with this 270th super semi-prime number of months to the occultation of Mars, which symbolizes war, which connects, as I explained in other videos, to the album War, because it was 40 years and 3 days after the album War released at 40 minutes and 3 seconds. And there's so much symbolism in the album War, including the building of a bomb that will be detonated in Manhattan. I mean, in one of the songs on the album War, there's talk about assembling a bomb in Times Square. Just for example, I get into this much more in the U2 War video, an absolute must-watch. I will post this. Okay, so that's, as I explained in this email I wrote in January. This is what I wrote 3 hours ago. Okay, so this confirms that this is written on March 16th. As I explained in this email I wrote in January regarding the very important comet G3 Atlas, the comet is about its nuclear outburst, and it is all about Obama. The comet's perihelion was on January 13th, and the day that the moon occulted Mars. Obama equals 68 in Hebrew gematria, and bomb also equals 68 in Hebrew gematria. 68 days after the comet's perihelion and the moon's occultation of Mars will be the half moon on March 22nd, the day of the predicted dirty bombs of nuclear weapons grade material in Manhattan. And speaking of Obama, the name, and the word bomb, equaling 68 in Hebrew gematria. This is a typo. The name Obama and the word bomb are equal to 32 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Which is why Suharto was in power as dictator of Indonesia for 32 years. What's also very important is that the prediction for these dirty bombs in New York City for March 22nd is known through this theme that God has been using involving the moon. And again, the G3 comet connects with the moon because it was the day that the moon occulted Mars. And this moon theme incorporates the half moon phase. This is how March 22nd was first discovered. It was through recognizing that God is indicating the half moon phase. And then because God was also pointing to the blood moon lunar eclipse on the night of March 13th, it was reasoned that maybe it would be the following half moon after that. And it turns out that it is. And it's a half moon. That's important. This is, again, how March 22nd is known. It's because it's the half moon, and it was 500,000 people who were killed in the Indonesia massacre. 500,000 people. Some say it up to 2 million, but the media, and it's considered to be the number, at least in the cultural understanding of what happened, 500,000 people. You could also say, what I'm also meaning is that it's at least 500,000, but the way it's usually described, it is being 500,000. And now I have just described or explained how all of this connects back to the Suharto massacre of 500,000. It's all connecting to the half moon phase and the predicted dirty bombs, which is war symbolism. What I also forgot to mention is I explained earlier the prophetic sign that was Sheriff Luna's statement that parts of Los Angeles County had looked like an atomic bomb had been dropped. Well, actually, one other thing too. That was the day of Jimmy Carter's funeral. And in God's signs, Carter is symbolic of Methuselah, who was the oldest patriarch in the Bible and died at the timing that the flood judgment began. And the name Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. And so God has been using Carter, the oldest living president, to hint at Methuselah and his death. And when Carter would die, it would mean destruction. When he dies, destruction. Well, at Carter's funeral, the big story was how Obama and Trump were talking, and no one knows what they were saying. And so the big story was, look who's talking. Well, on the day that Sheriff Robert Luna became the first Hispanic sheriff of Los Angeles County, it was the day of the death of the actress who starred in Look Who's Talking, Kirstie Alley. She also starred in Look Who's Talking 2, and we are predicting 2 atomic nuclear material dirty bombs in Manhattan. Okay? In the area code 212, incidentally. So that's an interesting thing too. That also ties it to Luna, because the day he became the sheriff was the day of the death of the actress of Look Who's Talking. Now, Sheriff Luna said his statement with regards to how parts of Los Angeles looked like an atomic bomb had been dropped on it the day after the prophetic apocalyptic evacuation in the Palisades fire in the Hollywood Hills. The evacuation is symbolism for what will occur after the bombs are predicted to explode in Manhattan. It's predicted that there will be an evacuation. So I forgot to mention that aspect. And I also forgot to tie in Kirstie Alley as well, and Trump and Jimmy Carter, and Obama with Trump talking.